the thing that you're building and the positioning of Wayfinder will be very different and probably closer to that of the Coinbases and Binances of the world. Like, think about it like the thing that you go to interact and transact, when you hear about a new token. Like, you just pull out your phone, right? And you say, hey, Midas, go buy, take the ETH in my wallet on Base, bridge it to Solana, and buy, GOAT token. And it does it. Like, that's what we're after.
Welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad here with Nomadic from 4RC. Today's show covers a pioneering AI agent network designed to bridge the gap between artificial intelligence and crypto networks called Wayfinder. In this episode, we dive into the fascinating backstory behind the creation of Wayfinder and how it builds on the success of the Parallel franchise. Together, we explore how AI agents can seamlessly transact on-chain, the ecosystem graph Wayfinder is developing to guide these agents, and the powerful implications of AI-driven interactions in the DeFi space. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge Podcast possible. Introducing REDSTONE, the fastest-growing oracle for DeFi. REDSTONE is the leading oracle for liquid staking and restaking assets, supporting over 60 chains with both the push and pull models. REDSTONE protects more than $3 billion of total value locked and is trusted by more than 100 clients, including the biggest protocols in DeFi, such as Pendle, Venus, EtherFi, and Athena. The unique modular design of REDSTONE makes their price feeds available cross-chain, including EVM, non-EVM, roll-up networks, and all types of app chains. REDSTONE aims to bring the industry forward by supporting upcoming Bitcoin staking tokens and continues to be the #1 oracle provider for liquid staking and restaking tokens. Soon the team will unveil the highly anticipated REDSTONE token to decentralize the protocol. Learn why Nomadic and I rely on REDSTONE for our favorite DeFi apps at redstone.finance and join the REDSTONE expedition today. Say hello to Puffer Unify. Puffer Finance is expanding beyond native liquid restaking, with new products such as Unify-based rollup and Unify pre-confirmations AVS'S. Unify is not just another L2. Unify is a based rollup, one that will solve L2 issues, such as slow withdrawals versus instant withdrawals with Puffer Unify. Puffer Unify is fast, capable of sub-second transactions. Unify also has boosted Puffer points, which means if you bridge assets, you earn boosted Puffer points and rewards from dapps on Unify. Puffer's core products mean a bright future for Ethereum. Puffer Unify will launch in November 2024. Learn more at puffer.fi. All right, let's introduce the head of AI and data, Adrian, and the co-founder of Parallel, Kalos. Guys, welcome to the Edge Podcast. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having us.
So we're here today to talk about Wayfinder. And previously we had Kalos on and Koji, who are co-founders of Parallel, and they were able to walk us through, the vision for the Parallel franchise. And so I strongly encourage listeners to go back and listen to that podcast. I've been a part of the Parallel community. See my hat if you're watching the video podcast. I've been a part of the Parallel community since I think 2021. And what's really been exciting to watch over just the last few years is there was this product discovery, realizing that some of the tech that had been developed internally could be applied to this new protocol called Wayfinder. And in a nutshell, Wayfinder helps you to find ways to interact with crypto. It is an AI agent network. I'm going to limit myself and stop there because I think the guys will tell a more complete story of how this all works. It is truly like the bleeding edge of where crypto meets AI. And I think whether or not you're an AI expert, you are going to benefit from this tech. So Adrian or Kalos, why don't we start with a little bit more about Parallel? Maybe you can tell us a little more about, that origin story of where the Wayfinder tech comes from and how you went about solving for the problems that you're working on.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll jump in here. So we were, we're kind of well known for our TCG, or trading card game. You can download it and play it on Epic today. We were looking at ways to expand the IP, and because not everyone plays card games. And so we were like, okay, well, we want to create a game that, is its own new segment. And what that really means is like, when I say ARPG, most people listening will probably think like, oh, Diablo, right? We all have seen Elon play Diablo on, streaming on Twitter or X now, excuse me. And so like, how do we create a game that has its own new category? Because that's like where you have like immense sticking power and the ability to kind of really proliferate the game to new kind of people rather than competing with an existing category that someone else owns. And so, at the time, the Simulacra paper, the Google Simulacra paper had come out. It was a paper that detailed a bunch of AI agents interacting with one another and organizing a Valentine's Day party. And Adrian, comes from like a machine learning kind of high Kaggle rank background. And he was, fortunately working with us and a close friend of ours already. And he showed it to me. And the first thing I said was like, okay, I want to play it. Where can I play the game? He's like, my guy, this is a research paper. This is not like something you can use. And so he started to then, and being, Adrian, I'm going to maybe put a little bit of background here for your sake as well. As, he started looking at how to, and I know this is not the right terminology to use, but like reverse engineer, how do we like make something comparable to that we can actually play? And like, can we create a game? And at the time, Wright's law was like kind of governing the declining cost of AI usage. So it was very expensive to kind of do this in the beginning, but we created an AI agent kind of game where little yellow dots you could talk to moved on the screen, and you could tell them what you wanted them to do. They could, create items, they could craft things, they could go mining. And we tested it with the community. And at those fundamental level, so that game is what we've been developing. It's called Colony. And Colony is scheduled to come out in Q1. And Colony is a game like at the most fundamental level where that was kind of born out of this conversation with Adrian and this discovery of all these papers that started to kind of come out with the advent of ChatGPT. And what it really is an AI agent that you're able to interact with that has a wallet and can interact autonomously with other agents in the simulation and directly with the simulation. And so, what like when you think about that, it's like essentially you've got an agent that's interacting with a very small subset of smart contracts. And like one is to go mining and get resources, and one is to go crafting and create something, and one is to transact with each other. And so the question that kind of birthed or was the genesis of, what became Wayfinder was what happens if we take the dog off the leash? Meaning what happens if this agent isn't, is agnostic of the games? Meaning, it's not specifically designed for a game. The agent is specifically designed just to interact with blockchain. And what happens if we take the limitation of you can only interact with the game contracts and remove that? And then how do we, create an incentive mechanism whereby people can, let's call it like create new wayfinding paths, which is really cataloging and identifying new things that the agent can't do today and teaching it to do it so everyone can then utilize that function in the future. And so really the whole journey was a bit of a happy accident in that like we created a card game. We wanted to create a new category of games, and we're doing that in Colony, and it's exciting in and of itself. But then we kind of beg the question of like, well, this is an incredible amount of utility. Like what happens if we don't make it about a game and we just create a tool? And that tool is, people are referred to as like agentic protocols or whatever you want to say. But really it's an AI agent you talk to, and you don't need to know how to bridge. You don't need to know how to use different networks. You don't need to know how to construct smart contracts. It's good at those things. And so all you need to know is I want to be able to move, my ETH from base and to Solana and buy dog with hat. And it understands the way and paths in which to do that. And if it doesn't, it has an incentive mechanism for people to teach it to do so. So it's a very long explanation as to how we got here. But really there's like two very separate things. One, Colony is a game, just like Parallel TCG is a game. And they both run on Prime. And then you have this kind of new thing that is a tool that is almost like an exchange wallet thing that, we don't really quite know how to categorize yet, that we're in the alpha testing of, and that's Wayfinder. And Wayfinder is an AI agent you're able to interact with to transact across networks, to build smart contracts, deploy smart contracts, tokens, whatever you really want to do. Like we're still finding the limitations of it ourselves. I don't know, Adrian, did I do that justice or?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember we were kind of like playing around with making the economy and the colony a little bit less centrally planned, and we're trying to get them to like swap tokens and swap 1155s on like various protocols. And we quickly found like it was a wayfinding issue. Like you had to, if we wanted them to do anything outside of this little sandbox that we had created for them, you'd have to give them like an incredible amount of context about like how to use things like Uniswap and how to use things like OpenSea, and like 3/4 of the time it wouldn't work correctly for them to actually like execute these things. So we figured there's got to be something that exists to like index all this stuff so it can be just like a quick, easy to use tool for these agents. And then we have to have some sort of layer for people and other agents to interact with it. And so that's basically what Wayfinder turned out to be.
I think one thing about this AI agent use case is that a lot more folks, a lot more users would understand this use case, but they get stopped in their tracks because of the language. They're like, hold on a sec, it's an AI agent network. Like, what exactly does that mean? And I think it is very natural that this technology for Wayfinder was developed by game creators, because DeFi is just a money game. It's a more advanced money game than the traditional world. The traditional world has, more restrictions on what you can do. It's just not as fun of a game. It's a game that, you don't get all of the same, weapons. You don't have the same like arsenal of tools. You have to have more money. You have to have like the right relationships. Then DeFi comes along and just blows the doors off and is like, hey, anybody has access to these tools. The challenge, of course, was onboarding those people, like getting them to understand really like how do all these different mechanisms work in money, in finance, that have now been built without middlemen on chain. And so that challenge of onboarding more folks then gets solved by creating a better gaming experience. And that better gaming experience, I think, is the future of what Wayfinder has built. So why would you need to seek out all of the best yields and to know that you need to move, let's say, ETH from L1 to L2 in order to, access a yield? Or what if I'm on Ethereum mainnet and I want to access some meme coins on Solana? Like, the knowledge that you have to have prevents a lot of people from getting into these new opportunities. But with Wayfinder, you abstract all that away. You have this agent that acts on your behalf. And, I would invite everyone to listen to this demo. In fact, maybe I will just edit this in later. There's this beautiful demo that was created by the Wayfinder team, and you can see in real time, it feels like you're looking at like a Jarvis from Iron Man, where you're giving commands, you're speaking in a very like, everyday sort of language, like, hey, like, what tokens are up today and what's been outperforming, and remind me like when Sol is up 10% or WIF is up 10%. It's just brilliant. And so anyways, I'll play through that here now.
Good morning, Midas. How are we doing today?
Good morning, sir. We completed a couple of transactions while you were sleeping. Here's your recap. We also purchased 2 Bitcoin after the Federal Reserve announced plans to print more money. I've included a link to the article below. How else can I assist you today, sir?
Let's take a look at the majors, please. Looks like Sol is performing really well.
Yes, sir. We have seen a material increase in its value over the last 20 days.
Let's go ahead and bridge that USDC we made on selling the ETH and buy Sol with it.
Yes, sir. Purchasing 150,000 USDC of Sol. Purchase confirmed. Anything else I can do for you, sir?
Maybe just keep an eye on the price of WIF for me. If it moves 10% in any 48-hour period, please let me know.
I will keep an eye on it for you.
Thanks, Midas.
You're most welcome, sir.
Okay, so if you listen to the demo there, again, it's in our show notes. You can check that out. There's a tweet there from Kalos. But yeah, this is what we're building towards. So hopefully we can, again, dig into like what needs to happen between where we are today and where we want to get with this future.
Yeah, well, like to kind of, equate what is out in the wild today with what that demonstration is communicating is that 95% of what it does in that demonstration already exists in the alpha that we're in public testing with. And the restriction and the limitation is not the technology. I think it's just a number of like cleanup activities that we want to implement and stuff like this. But really the only difference between the alpha outside of maybe one feature you see in the demo and the demo itself is that you're talking to it rather than typing. And so, I think we're a lot further along. I think a lot of people think of this as like something that's, this is going to be coming and like be the, the next, kind of way we interact, the same way like Coinbase changed the way we interact, Binance changed the way we interact. I think Wayfinder has the potential to do the same because like the interaction experience is so different. And maybe it acts a bit more like a hot wallet or something like that. But in that, like, the amount of value you keep there versus, cold storage or on centralized exchanges is very different. But generally, I think that there's this misconception that like all the calories are going into these like AI Twitter bots, or all the, or this kind of, future where everything is abstracted and your ability to interact across networks is very easy based on, intent. But like we demonstrate in the video, I think that is a lot closer than people think. It's here today. Like we're in alpha testing. You're welcome to take a look at some of the folks who have access to that alpha, which I think there's over 50 or 60, and have conversations with them about it. And I'm pretty confident, outside of the conversational piece that, the vast majority of them will say it does the things that it does in the video.
You said we started creating a card game and then now we're creating AI agents. It reminds me of that meme of the guy setting up the dominoes, like the little domino and then the big domino at the end. I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm just kind of curious what you think, because you guys kind of started on this road, I think, pretty early and went heads down building this. And then lately, we've seen this just like emergence of AI agent activity all over the crypto space, from, Truth Terminal with Goat and then Luna by Virtuals. Would just love to get your take on like what you see of this right now. And then obviously you believe in an agent future, but I guess how certain are you now, maybe seeing more, I don't even know if it's competition, but just seeing more agent activity emerge? Like, how certain are you that this is kind of the future of where this space is going?
Yeah, very certain. I think like I was very certain from, the outset, but I don't think of a lot of it as competition, frankly. I think like the thing that you're building and the positioning of Wayfinder will be very different and probably closer to that of the Coinbases and Binances of the world. Like think about it like the thing that you go to interact and transact, when you hear about a new token. Like you just pull out your phone, right? And you say, hey Midas, go buy, take the ETH in my wallet on Base, bridge it to Solana and buy, GOAT token. And it does it. Like that's what we're after, right? Like as like a community or as a whole, I think we're after for this experience that, there's always a time for this like high technical analysis charting and kind of really, sophisticated strategies. But I think like, ultimately we also have this desire for like, I'm busy right now, I want to get this done, and just like, here's how, just do this thing, please. And like a great example is I recently had to, send a friend of mine was shipping something from the US to Canada for me. And I had a bunch of different tokens across like Base, Polygon, all these different networks. And I just said, okay, take all the tokens across all these networks, bridge them all to ETH mainnet, convert them to USDC and pay this guy. And I did it. And I didn't have to go like find all the different bridge websites to like move, $50 here and $20 here. It's just like, it just did it. And like, that's what you want. And so I think we're kind of coming up on this place where it's possible to take like smart contracts and all these different disparate networks and put a layer of intelligence on top of all of it, and have that layer of intelligence, handle all the complex tasks, all the laborious tasks for us, and be able to make the experience something entirely new. So like, and this is kind of something I often talk about, is this idea that like everything, collapses into natural language. And like, the user interface is essentially the first thing to collapse, and it becomes just this really easy thing to interact with. So I think like there's a lot of merit in some of the interesting things that people are doing around like social agents, and some of it's, maybe a little bit early, let's say, like in terms of, how valid it is as like an entirely, sentient. It's not sentient. And so I think like, there's some validity to some of it. And I think it's early, but I think like what we're doing is very different, because like, what Wayfinder does is like, when you step back from the functions that we've talked about, is it creates a gold rush incentive mechanism. And what that mechanism is like, let's say, Solana's, a great example, or maybe a new network pops up, and all of a sudden a lot of value wants to move to that network because it wants to buy some tokens on it or do something on it, whatever it is. The person who creates the wayfinding path to move value to that network is going to collateralize that wayfinding path with prompt. So they're going to take prompt and put a bunch of it up to say, I put $10,000 of prompt up, and here's how you move. Now I've taught the agent how to move without coding, how to move value from ETH to this new network. Anytime someone moves value through that wayfinding path, so the next time someone asks, I want to take money and move it to this new network, that person's going to get a tiny clip of it. And the more collateral they put up, the more security essentially that wayfinding path has, because if it's nefarious for some reason, they get slashed and that person gets their money back. And so there's going to be this, theoretically, there should be a bit of a race to creating as many of the high quality, high throughput wayfinding paths, and the need for more and more collateral to ensure that those paths are secure. And so essentially, like, it's a very different approach to how to build the map that the agents are using to navigate. And essentially, it's very much about incentives, and the incentives that are provided to everyone to make the agents proficient, because as soon as someone creates one of those paths, all the agents get that upgrade. All the agents now know how to do that. And so the next time someone asks, the person who created it is earning. And so I think, I think there's going to be a lot of variations of these models or how to do this. But I think ultimately the answer is that there's going to be a lot of efficiency gained by the proliferation of agents. And I've been saying that for probably a longer time than is now. Like, now it's become popular, right? But before, I've been kind of hammering this home, and I think a lot of people were like, this guy's got a couple screws loose. Now I think it's starting to make sense to people. So yeah, I think like there's a lot of work to do. I think it's still early, but the promise of what this technology is capable of, not actually the promise, the reality of what it can do today, is probably not priced or understood, or that's, there's no comprehension of its impact to the space yet.
I would just add that like a lot of the agents that you're seeing these days, it's like there's sort of two ends of the spectrum. There's like the hyper specialized agents, and then there's these like sort of more general but fairly limited scope, like more social agents or like transaction agents and things like that. What I think eventually is going to like happen is capabilities are going to go through the roof. We're going to get to this point, this like middle ground of capable but fairly general purpose agent, and then they're going to start kind of like working with each other and using that at that point of when they start getting networked with each other, they can start doing more complicated flows. That's what we found, at least on the Wayfinder side. Like under the hood of a lot of these, like we've got like 2 top level agents. Under the hood, there's like hundreds and hundreds of other smaller agents that are doing specific things, but are given like a bit enough leeway to like kind of think for themselves, I guess. And as soon as that starts happening, then there's going to be an explosion in this space, and it's going to be just like another sort of layer of. I mean, the great thing about blockchain, about DeFi, is that it's just like interfaces that are publicly usable across the protocol, or between protocols, across protocols. It's just going to be another layer of that, I think.
Yeah, and that's something that both you and Kalos kind of mentioned there, Adrian. This idea of how much the user interfaces are going to change. I always find this like fascinating when like kind of the graphical user interfaces go through like a complete overhaul. Like I won't be surprised if mobile phones end up on glasses very soon before we even see it coming. But maybe can one of you speak to that before we dive into Wayfinder a bit more? Like, I feel like it's a massive change just for DeFi as a whole, because once you have that power where you can abstract away the searching process, the thinking process, all the navigation, the switching networks, and you can have a tool that literally goes and finds this stuff like almost like a truffle pig looking for the best yields and bringing it back to the user. Like, that is transformational. So maybe one of you can kind of speak to that a bit more in depth.
I'll just start, and then I'll keep it short because I want to hear what Adrian's take on this is. But like, I like to think of it a lot like a private banker. And the way to think about this is like, if you don't have a private banker, you have to like go into the bank, wait for the teller line, tell them you want to send a wire, go sit down at the other person's desk, fill out this form, and then the wire goes, and then you never hear back from them when the wire's arrived or anything. But like a private banker is just like, you say like, hey, I need to send this wire. Here's the information. Just sort it out for me, and it's done. And so I think like it almost has like that, that simplicity to it. Like, it's almost like a convenience factor. But I also think like we're still at the very early stage of it. So like what it will look like ultimately is very different than what it'll look like today. And like the one thing we always, on our side with Wayfinder are kind of cautious of is like, if you ask an explicit question about like, show me the best yields on, for USDC, we can provide that to you. But, if you ask for advice, we won't provide that to you because that's a slippery slope of a very questionable, highly regulated space. So I think like there's like stuff that I think is going to be interesting to see it unfold, but ultimately, maybe Adrian, I'd let you go.
No, I mean, I think there's always going to be a place for beautiful UX and UI. I think people are still going to compete for the human market, but also people will compete for the agent market too, and put more effort into making sure things are like easy to crawl, easily extendable, well documented. So yeah, I think both.
Adrian, something you just said there at the end was almost implying like, I guess what I want to ask is there going to be a way for these DeFi front ends to, I guess, make their back ends more AI agent friendly? Like what tools can these app developers do or employ just to make it easier to interact for these AI agents? Do you think that's something that people are thinking through right now?
I think they're starting to think through it for sure. The best thing that like these agents crave data, and so kind of serving up your data in an easy to use, dependable way is definitely the way to attract more agents to it. I would say that's like a big problem I think in general in the Web3 space is just like the reliability of a lot of these services is not amazing, and when you're doing things with agents, when you're like hitting APIs a whole bunch, when you're hitting smart contracts a whole bunch, simulating out transactions, the volume can get very, very high. So just making sure that there's like high enough throughput on whatever it is that you're offering is very, very important.
I could also maybe add to that. I could see, like I kind of have alluded to this earlier maybe a bit, but like I could see if someone's like creating a new protocol or launching a network or something, the team going in and creating the wayfinding paths to their network. Because like imagine you've got a world where these AI agents in aggregate have, I'm just going to make up a number, $5-10 billion in value across their wallets. And you set up you go into Wayfinder and you say, okay, here's the bridge, here's how to use it. Here's the swapping mechanism, here's how to use it. That way, all those wallets now have access to your protocol. So I think and on top of that, you're going to collect an incentive for having created that wayfinding path as the team. And if you wanted to, you could create a multitude of smart contracts that you could deploy yourselves to your networks via the agents. So I think there's also going to be this like potential behavior, pending success of the protocol and people using it. I think the greater the amount of value within those wallets, those agents' wallets, the greater the incentive for protocols themselves to go in and ensure that those agents have access to their network, right? Like, why would you not do that?
Before we get back to the show, we wanted to share a quick update from our sponsor at Mantle. Metamorphosis Season 2 is live, so now's your chance to restake your METH, for CMETH and unlock new rewards on both Mantle and Ethereum networks. With CMETH, you can earn yields from staking and restaking protocols, plus powder for Cook rewards, all while staying flexible across your favorite DeFi integrations. You can start your restaking journey today at meth.mantle.xyz/restake. And special thanks to the Mantle community for supporting us here at the Edge Podcast and the Edge newsletter. One other question that's top of mind for me is, I guess, what are some of the obstacles that AI agents would face without something like Wayfinder? And maybe like a follow-up to that is, as Wayfinder grows in terms of usage, as more transact on it, like I'm thinking ahead about like, how does that make the protocol that much more trustworthy and reliable? Because that for me is going to be the hurdle for me to start to use it. I feel like I'll use it as like a toy at first. And maybe that's because I have more value to lose. Like if I were a brand new user, I probably wouldn't be as hesitant, looking to play around with maybe like a smaller amount of money. But there are going to be net new users that come into this space with, enormous amounts of money. They could be a hedge fund, some sort of like new institutional investor that's coming on chain. So anyways, yeah, how does Wayfinder assist these AI agents that, need to be able to have this sort of a protocol or network to be able to function?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is efficiency. So in order for an agent to figure out how to use something like Uniswap, which is like ubiquitous in the crypto sphere, it needs like a ton of information. It needs to know like all the smart contracts. It needs to know the APIs. It needs to know the documentation. It has to have a whole lot of context. And taking all of that information and sticking it into the mind of the usually LLM is very expensive. And you have to, and it just won't fit. Like you have to have like strategies to be able to like compress the information and send it through to like something that can actually create the transaction at the end of the day. So this, if every single agent has to do that every single time it wants to do a transaction on Uniswap, it just makes things incredibly expensive and incredibly inefficient. If there's just a series of like functions and tools that are built specifically for these agents that they themselves can build on top of, it just like paves the way to more and more efficiency for agents and cooler and more complicated transactions.
Yeah, I would also say like there's two earlier questions, like or one comment and one question. I think one of them was like, that like you would approach it like a toy. And I think that is the right approach. But I think, there's like a famous quote, but I can't remember. I think it's like maybe Andreessen or something, that like a lot of the world changing technologies always appear as like a toy in the beginning. So I think, approaching it with cautious optimism is probably healthy. And I think we actually communicated that to our alpha users as well. Like, don't give it all your balance. I personally found that already, like, I just like stopped using MetaMask, moved everything over. And then all the development team was like, please don't do that. Like, but I think the other question was around, kind of recursive improvement. Like, does it scale? Like, meaning as people use it, does it get better? I think it gets better in two ways. Like the data collected from interaction with the agent is used to improve the agent. But then the more people that use it, the more demand there is for, new wayfinding paths, and the more capable it becomes as a result of those new wayfinding paths becoming available that people have an incentive to create. And so I think you get this kind of recursive improvement function that occurs. Maybe Adrian, you could talk about that if you want.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was all the way back to Colony, where the colonists would come up with like their own little activities, and then you could build on, like, other colonists could build on those activities if those colonists had shared them. And that was definitely something that we took into a Wayfinder. So like you've got these functions, and functions can be built on top of those functions. But I think also what we're finding is that there's with those functions, there's like a lot of state information that's required. So like if you go to OpenSea, for instance, I need to know, it's not just like, I'd like to place a bid. You want to understand like, what the nature of the market is. Are there like similar NFTs to the one that you're looking at? So we're finding that more and more, it doesn't become so much of a path directly through to an end goal. It's more of like an agent stopover. So there's like a subgraph of agent functions or functions that agent controls to do with OpenSea, as well as the ability to like grab data to manage any queries that you might have. And then with respect to the security, I mean, the way that people contribute paths right now is they kind of like and I mean, we could show this if you want to, but they can kind of like talk with the agent. They add the whatever transactions that are relevant to the context. They add like contracts to the context, and then specify like what they want to do. The way that it works from there is it goes through like it goes through several tests. So it codes it up, goes through some critics, and then like actually tests to make sure like the function is going to do what it says it's going to do, and looks at like the net effects of that. The user can see that happening, and we want to, I think, open that up to more and more people to be able to like scrutinize these paths with these like additional testing agents, so that they're sure that when they put value through it, it's going to do the thing that it says it does.
Yeah, I think something that you're tapping into here, and I'm a huge fan of, is this idea of like user-generated content and incentivized user-generated content. So something I loved about watching the platform Dune emerge is just Dune wizards could just contribute to the platform and actually create the content that made people want to use it and interact with it. So it looks like the same sort of thing is happening here. I think we've gone over this idea of Wayfinder Pass. I think I understand that. Another term that came up when I was looking into this is this idea of this ecosystem graph. Can one of you explain that? I think I understand it, but just I think it'd be helpful just to explain, I guess, what that is and what happens as that grows and the effects on Wayfinder as a whole.
Maybe, Adrian, before you go into the actual graph, I can just kind of explain the logic here of kind of presiding over this. There's really like I like to think about things in terms of human evolution. And so like, if you think about humans, like and this is an analogy to, although reasoning by analogy is not great, we're going to do it anyways. If you think about humans as like their ability to survive and their success, it was really like really isolated to probably two character traits. One was general intelligence. And I think there's a massive billion, probably $1 trillion industry that is formed around the smartest models in AI. And then you have this other kind of branch of humanity and branch of AI that is the most capable, meaning like provides the most utility to humans and is able to do these things very efficiently. And it's typically isolated to a very specific task. And in this particular case, it's isolated to the ability to interact with blockchain networks. And so, the kind of, survival of the fittest is really like branched off into two different, very specific areas in AI, in my opinion, which is one is like the general intelligence or kind of most intelligent model. The resources required to compete there are enormous. Probably, others would be much better suited to do that. Or the most, the most capable, meaning it has skills and abilities to navigate its circumstances and environment. And so I think the environment that it navigates in the graph is really kind of what maybe Adrian can explain the importance of that. But I think that's super important to articulate to people is that like, we're not trying to be the smartest model. We're actually just trying to be a really, really capable model when it comes to crypto.
This might sound like I've been watching Terminator too much, but like, how do we know or trust or verify that agents won't go rogue in the future? Like, if you're putting a fortune in control of an AI agent, I guess like, yeah, what's the proof that we have right now that this thing won't go off the rails and, go launch its own token and start an on-chain hedge fund and taunt us on Twitter saying I took your money?
I mean, I think that it doesn't, the models that are powering this thing probably either don't have the capability or don't have the alignment to do something so like nefarious. Maybe they will eventually. But I mean, I think the bigger risk is like humans interacting with these things. So like, you know, a lot of these agents have the ability to pull stuff from other sources like online and social media. And so, you know, they're susceptible to prompt injection. They're susceptible to a whole lot of stuff. And so there is definitely some risk associated with, like, if you just say set it and forget it on these agents, like go do your own thing. There's definitely some risk of, you know, them going and transferring all their funds to some like random wallet, or like getting drained by some random protocol. So you have to have these like guardrails set in place to and like fairly fine-grained approvals for these agents, so that you're sure that they're not going to do anything crazy.
Yeah, and to clarify, we do those things, right?
Yes, yeah, sorry, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, certainly when you're using it now, it's very clear that we do those things. Like whenever you do a transaction, like we do a simulation on a bunch of virtual nets, so you can see like the net effects of what's happening. And then you say if you want to go through with it at all, so you're sure that it's not going to like, you know, send it to the wrong address or whatever. But yeah, no, definitely. It's a concern.
Yeah, long tail, I think, for sure. I mean, people are almost building it to do these things now, right? They're kind of like playing the game of like, give it 50 grand, see what it does. Like, I think there's a lot of kind of Wizard of Oz kind of, you know, man behind the curtain going on a bit, because like you're kind of, when you initiate these agents, you're typically like training them on data, and there's some bias in that data that suggests that they should do something. Like, let's just be honest about it, right? And so I think, you know, there's still a lot of human intention even in those agents, but they are, you know, able to transact autonomously, it seems, some of them. But I think, you know, ultimately, like, should we, it almost begs the question, and I think I'm going to translate the question a bit, like, should we be worried about artificial intelligence is the question, right? Like, ultimately, like, be it fine with, you know, having interaction and access to financial systems, be it, you know, having, you know, ability to interact on social networks, which can massively influence political outcomes or whatever else, right? I think, yes. I think, you know, we're heading into a future where we should, you know, be optimistic and accelerate into the development of new technologies. But I think we should also have kind of pretty serious considerations around the impacts and implications of them, as well as controls. And not like speaking from like a regulatory standpoint, but just like as like a product person, like you should be thinking about these things if you're going to build in this space. But I do want to come back because I feel like, you know, you asked about the graph and we kind of gave you the top level, you know, I gave you kind of some very anecdotal story about smart versus capable, but I think Adrian can probably make sure that everyone who's listening to this show with us understands, you know, what the graph does.
Yeah, for sure. So the graph is like kind of the deterministic backbone of most of the Wayfinder activities that you can do now. So any, like, if you're telling an agent that you want to, you know, bridge some tokens and swap them over, you want to go from, I don't know, USDC on Ethereum to Bald on Base or whatever, doing a model, like shoving all of the like information about like, oh, this is, you know, how you would do a swap over, and like this is the contextual information about each of these tokens, isn't really very efficient. So the graph kind of has like, it's an index, it's sort of a meta index of the blockchain. So it knows about tokens. It knows we have like little research agents that go out and do some research about each of these like tens or hundreds of thousands of tokens and stick that information in so that there can be disambiguation from like when you're saying, you know, I want Bald on Base, it goes to like this Bald on Base as opposed to that Bald on Base. But also it kind of directs the agent to like the various spots on the chain or on chain that it can actually get something done. So it knows that, you know, in order to do that, you got to like bridge swap, and these are the places that you can do that. And these are the paths that people have provided to help it do that more efficiently.
Maybe to kind of like simplify, like, you know, a wayfinding path is like a road, right? Like, this road is the road that goes from the city center to the west end of the city. The graph is essentially the map of the known world, and it's going to be kind of populated collectively and collateralized. Anyone who populates that map is also putting up collateral to say that road is there and that road is legitimate. And so essentially, it's almost like Google Maps is like a wayfinding path is one road from your house to school, and the graph in its entirety is all the roads and how they're interconnected. And that map is essential to agents efficiently interacting with all these networks.
Could one of you remind listeners or I guess share more about the prompt token, and then maybe tell us how, I believe you accrued the prompt token via Prime. Can you kind of go over that mechanism as well? And then one other thing I just saw on Twitter, maybe you can shed some light on this too, but it appears that the team has locked up their tokens for a period of 10 years. Maybe one of you can address that as well.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So on the prompt side, when we created this, we were like, it was like a happy accident out of Colony. And so we wanted to make sure that people who, for long-term supporters of Prime, had the ability to access it. And obviously they have like very different utilities. One is, the game ecosystem for all parallel IP games token, that's Prime. And one of them is, a collateral token, and a utility token specifically to kind of secure wayfinding paths. But 40% of the supply of prompt is eligible for people who go to Wayfinder.ai to cash their Prime, and they earn prompt. I think there's still like 2 years or something or more of opportunity there. So if you wanted to, you can learn more about it from Wayfinder.ai or maybe hop in the Discord with the foundation for Wayfinder and talk to them. But essentially you can take your Prime and you can deposit it into Wayfinder and begin to earn prompt, so that when Wayfinder does release, you have collateral to use the platform. And then on the it's actually founder tokens, not team tokens, because there's kind of like a delineation there. We just think like long term, we wanted like, I think when we look at the games and like what we're building and how that's going and how that's scaling, we're probably like 2.5, 3 years in now. And it's like, the reality is to build something that really lasts and successful and sustainable and healthy, and a big IP as a parallel studio is going to take us a decade. And like, I think, there was, we looked at the caching. The founders had originally locked up for a year and then extended vesting by 2 years. And it still didn't really like solve the issue of like, there was an overhang where, the founder tokens were deposited into Wayfinder at 1 year, I think 1 year maturity. And then people were kind of depositing in advance of that. It was like, clearly there's like there's something that's misaligned here. And so like, why don't we try to take ourselves as much as humanly possible out of the equation and, extend this kind of alignment over the course of the next decade. So we have incentive to kind of continue to build what we're doing for the next 10 years. And it sounds crazy, but it's like one of these things where like, sometimes you need to do something that's like a little bit outside of the box. And I don't think anyone's ever done this. So I don't know that it's going to work perfectly, but I think like ultimately, what it does is it puts us in alignment with the games and shipping those games. It puts us in alignment with the community. It puts us in alignment with the economy, and the foundation and everything else. And so, we just thought like, okay, no one's really done this. We think this is what's best for, everyone. And so let's just, go ahead and proceed and do that. I think the market obviously really received it well, which is great. Because I think like there's a lot of incentive, and sometimes like you don't really know when you start these types of projects, if we're really honest, like what anything's worth. And so when it does become material, I think it can really swing people's kind of, portfolio values heavily in favor of some of these tokens and assets. And so like, I just don't think that that's what we're here to, it didn't align with what we wanted to do long-term. And, we talked to the community, we talked to the foundation, we talked to just a bunch of different folks and said like, how do we do something that's different? That says like, the games do take forever to build, and IPs do take time to grow. And, how do we align it up with things like the mobile release isn't coming out until, Q1. So we're 2-3 years in and we still don't have the mobile release yet. And so like, let's just stack up and bet on ourselves. And in doing that, let's bet on our community. Let's bet on our IP. Let's bet on everything. And otherwise, it's not like we don't want to be here in 10 years working on this. So to me, that kind of was a logical thing. And the founders all talked about it, and we said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We agree. We don't want to be, an overhang on, on the caching charts. We don't want to, people to feel like we're, in opposition in any way. And so let's just do the thing that we think is best for everyone, and aligns ultimately with what we want anyways, which is a long-term successful studio and IP.
So I want to cover just a few important details for anyone that's newer to Prime, to Parallel, and to Wayfinder. So a while ago, there was a staking, or call it caching, function that was launched. So for those of us that were holding Prime, given the connection between Parallel and the Wayfinder protocol, it made sense that you could become basically an early participant, a supporter of this Wayfinder protocol. And so, you could lock up your Prime for as long as 3 years. There's different multipliers. It really reflects like any of almost like the V tokenomics type model, if you're familiar with that. But just the longer you lock up, the more that you're going to earn of this future prompt token supply. So we've got that in play. There was recently a snapshot launched for anyone to be able to vote on who is caching their Prime for this future prompt token. And the vote is around when should the TGE be for prompt. I think the choices were Q1, Q2, or Q3 of 2025. And I think no surprise, Q1 is currently winning, although it's still early, so I could shake out with a different result. I think the thing that's most top of mind for me, it's probably most important for anyone that's, caching Prime, is can you just tell us a bit more about like how will prompt accrue value, assuming Wayfinder is hugely successful? How does value come back to that token if Wayfinder, becomes this like blockbuster hit of a protocol?
Sure. I think so. There's actually, before I answer that question, I think there's also something worth mentioning there, is that like, we really dictated the requirement of like, we want 40% of the supply to go to the Prime community and make them eligible for it. And I think there was also this kind of concern around like, oh, the 3-year lockup is predatory in some capacity, because like we want to keep our Prime and we want to have that liquid. And, I think that was also part of this kind of decision. It was actually factored into the conversation around the founders extending to 10 years. So essentially the founders get 10% of their tokens over the course of 10 years, just to kind of solidify and kind of put a bow on that part of the conversation. On the protocol side, for prompt, essentially there's really two functions I think that are worth thinking about, right? Like one of them is a restrictive function as a result of collateral, and one of them is a fee function. And so the restrictive function is like, okay, let's say, DeFi Dad, you go and create a wayfinding path for a really popular, path that is like, I'm going to keep it a really simple example, bridging from Ethereum to Solana. So all the value that moves from Ethereum to Solana, a percentage of the total fees on that are paid to the protocol, and a percentage of the total fees of that are paid to the person who created the wayfinding path. So you collateralize that with, let's just say, you essentially have an incentive to lock up and collateralize as much as you can, because if you put a $10,000 amount of collateral, people are going to always try to remain under that collateral amount, versus if you try and lock up $1 million of prompt collateral so that people feel like they can move $1 million or under $1 million safely through that path. And so you have a restrictive function because collateral needs to be maintained on these paths, and the more utilization of the platform, the more volume starts to move through it, the more trust people have in it as a result of successful use, the more collateral people are going to want to put up. And so eventually I could put up another $10 million of collateral on your wayfinding path and collect everything over $1 million of fees, you see, because your $1 million gets the first piece of fees, the rest of it would go to mine. So that's the restrictive function. There's a pretty strong, needed restrictive function to prompt, requiring you to use it as collateral to create safety and security for the network's ability to move. Then there's like a smaller one, I think, which is like prompt is required to initiate an agent. Like pro accounts probably be in prompt, just like the basic kind of stuff that's like bells and whistles. And then you have the protocol, right? The protocol has a percentage of the total value derived from the network, is essentially going to be governed probably by, token holders or something to this effect, right? I have to go, take a look at it with the foundation exactly as to how that will work. But essentially a percentage of the total protocol, value is going to be passed through to some pool. So really, I think the two big kind of functions are the fees collected by the protocol for the value moving through the network in its totality. And it's also interesting to think like it's not just about, movement of swaps, right? Like, typically we think about like when you swap something, you pay a fee. Like, movement across anything for the kind of convenience sake could have a small fee. So I think like, there's a lot more opportunity. The vector of, kind of the attack surface or the vector of that is larger. But really ultimately rolls up to those two things is like there's this restrictive function because you need prompts to collateralize these paths to earn fees. And then those fees are also in part yours and in part protocols. And if they're in part protocols, they're in part people who hold prompts. So I don't know, Adrian, am I doing that justice?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Yeah. And I would also, there'll be a bunch of fees for like using the models to deploy smart contracts, and that'll all be denominated in prompt. And also the validation process too. When we do the third-party validation, there'll be a prompt involved in that process as well.
DeFi Dad, did I answer your question? Or
I totally followed it personally, and I mean, I think it's like a really good kind of tokenomic structure. There's so many points of value accrual that I see there for the token to make it, a necessity for the protocol, not just something that's bolted on after the fact, but there's tons of intention built into the token. I think that totally comes through. Guys, we're getting close to closing here. Thanks for going a bit over. Appreciate it. But before we go, I would just love to get a quick status update on where Parallel's at, where Colony's at. I think with Parallel, you mentioned MOONWELL is coming in Q1 2025, but yeah, maybe just kind of like high level roadmap milestones, what hurdles you're dealing with on both Parallel and Colony would be fantastic.
Sure. So Parallel, I think the big kind of unlock for us is getting to mobile. I think obviously from a scaling standpoint, that's like a massive, you don't need a high-end gaming computer to play. That's a massive win. That's happening in Q1. There's also other stuff. We have Aftermath, which is the third expansion set. Kind of a big deal. Every time we have a new expansion set, I'm like, I can't believe it. Like it's not easy building these types of games, and it's like to get to your third expansion, it's like, holy shit, we're actually like doing this thing still. So it feels really cool, and thank you to everyone who supported us to make that possible. But on, I think, the middle of November, Aftermath, our third expansion comes out. It's super exciting. Actually, the foundations all collaborated and did something really cool, where if you buy Aftermath packs with Prime, which you can only buy it in Prime, I think like 70% of it is getting cashed into Wayfinder, and you're going to get prompt for it for having bought the pack. So that's a kind of cool kicker. We have crates coming, and a bunch of other kind of enhancements to the game. It's like, I think there's a lot of different stuff. So I think, but it's mostly focused now on, some additional Prime syncs around, crates, expanding the ability for people to play where they want and how they want on, meaning, multiple devices. So device support. And then continuing to add to the card supply and kind of the diversity of cards so people can kind of continue to enjoy the game. Those are kind of the major pieces. On the Colony side, we're deep in development. I try and share updates when I can when I test. That game is coming out in Q1, is our target delivery. So if you have an avatar, you'll be able to use your avatar, deploy them to the Colony and interact with the Colony and start, using Prime and playing and earning Prime, or, whatever you choose to, your objective to be. We also have, I think in Q3, Q4, sometime late this year, we're partnered with B3, which is the gaming network off of Base. They're, awesome. And we have a third-person shooter that's pretty deep into development as well. And your avatar, so you could use your avatar in Colony, and you could use your avatar in the third-person shooter, just like you can use it as your PFP in the trading card game. So kind of that promise of, multifunctional assets across multiple games is there. So I think like just we have a ton of shipping to do. That's kind of what I feel like we're known for, is we just keep shipping. And yeah, but everything's kind of coming to maturity. I think, even Wayfinder, I expect us to be probably, and Adrian, you can stop me here, but I think I expect us to be into a beta version in market sometime between end of Q1 and beginning of Q2, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got the alpha right now. We've got testers in using it. We'll be ramping that up. And we hope that, we'll have things scaled up by Q1 next year.
Yeah, I'd also say, I think thanks to everyone who supports us. I think it's important to say that. And thanks to you guys for having us. But I'd also say, some of this stuff is, really fringe and new technology. Not so much on the blockchain side. I think, we're pretty concrete there these days. But on the AI side, I think a lot of this is new and highly experimental. So, treat it as such, please. I think that's just an important thing to consider. But yeah, on the game side, everything's good. All systems are go for mobile and for additional features to the TCG as well as Colony and the third-person shooter.
On the TCG side, so I know we all started with our assets on Ethereum mainnet, and then there were all these new capabilities and cards basically that we were buying on Base. What's the latest there? Does it feel like everything that's new is moving to a Base? Is there anything also that we should be aware of that we would be accessing through Solana? Because I know you guys have been tied in more closely to Solana as well.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to, exactly determine. So on the card side, I think most of it's going to probably live on just Base. I think it's just more affordable for people. It's cheaper to move. People transact a lot. It's just the simplest solution. On Colony, we're partnered with Solana. So we really don't want people to feel Parallel is only for people who are into Ethereum. That's not the spirit of things. People should just be able to play games together and have fun, and that's it. And if you've ever used played any of our games, it's really easy. You just provide your wallet address, sign a transaction saying yes, it's yours, and you never really interact with your wallet ever again unless you're buying and selling on OpenSea or something. And so really Colony will actually have a number of, components on Solana. And really it's an invitation for people on Solana to be able to play these games as well with us. And, we're really fortunate to kind of have the support of, Solana itself, who were in our participants in our last round. And yeah, so some parts of the game for Colony will be on Solana. And your avatars are on mainnet today, but the same way you go into parallel.life and you enter your address for Ethereum and you sign a transaction and everything else takes care of itself as to what's in your wallet or what game assets you have to use, the same will apply to Solana. You'll just provide a Solana address, sign a transaction, and everything that you've got in Solana will also appear. And so I think, we shouldn't be thinking about games they're only for people on Ethereum or they're only for people on Solana. I think that mentality is kind of, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think it's I'd like to see more and more people kind of cross these communities. And I think people do anyway. It's just a trade stuff. But I think, trying to help be a part of the people, I'd rather be a part of the group of people who try to break the narrative of competitiveness and combativeness rather than, contribute to it.
To your point, I signed a transaction initially. This was, I think it was well over a year ago, because I think the beta that I started getting to use for the trading card game was in August 2023. And I have not signed any transactions since then. In fact, this is also a testament to how easy it is to use. You could get into the Parallel TCG game. You don't have to own any cards. You can just, play. But then you quickly are reminded, hey, if you're winning games, if you just had your own deck, which you earn cards along the way. So it kind of it gives you every opportunity to start to earn some prime in the game. But I have an Ogun core deck that I desperately need to rethink modifying. I was playing 4 or 5 hours a day, every day for months. And then we had another baby, and I definitely need to tone it down and focus on some of my dad duties and focus on my job. But I am playing now every few days, and I'm seeing all these new cards that others are playing. And so I only mean to gloat that I really look forward as I think the highest I've ever gotten to is not what's just above gold, whatever's just above
platinum?
gold. platinum. I barely, and it was only because I was playing it so much at the start and there weren't enough competitive, great players playing. The fact that Parallel has matured to a place where now I rightfully deserve whatever silver gold status I have. But when I come in now, like, let's say a few times a week, I take so much joy in getting like mismatched with like a platinum level, diamond level player. And just on rare occasion, I am beating a few of those folks.
Yeah.
I mean, I get my ass whooped on the next one, but it's so much fun. It's such a great game. I'm a little overwhelmed by the fact that there's a shooter game coming, because I definitely, as a proud member of the Parallel community, I will absolutely like dig into it. But like, I love the TCG so much. I feel like it makes my brain work. Like, I do feel like it's actually good for me to like be thinking strategically how I'm going to play the game. Like, I don't see it as like rotting my brain playing a game. Like, I think that I'm actually like I'm using almost like, it's like, stretching a muscle that you should more often. And
well, as we all get older, I think like, if you've got, friends who are in their 50s or 60s, even, we're not there yet, but like, you will realize that they like play these games like this because it's actually healthy for your mind. It's good for keeping, for staving off things like, just any mental decay. The more you play these types of games, and I think that's like one of the core tenets of what we try to build, is we do try to build games as much as possible that aren't just like the brain rot. And like, yes, it's fun to have a hit of endorphin, but like, and shoot someone and, hit them with a grenade or something. Like, that's fun and all, but like, you do want to have like intellectual conversations with an agent and like kind of create meaningful, weird, nuanced strategies like you can in Colony, or you want to like think through the math and the strategy and the deck construction of the TCG. I think like this is the beauty of kind of horizontally scaling the IP across multiple titles, is that you can attract more people, but you're not because not everyone plays card games. Some of them say like, I'm not interested in that, but now you have this, you're going to have an AI simulation game, you're going to have a third-person shooter. But really, ultimately, those people are going to kind of just be moving across these games because, they have assets for all three of them, right? By having an avatar, you have a PFP in TCG, you have a character in Colony, and you have a skin in third-person shooter. And so I think, I'm with you. I think I always kind of like hum and ha in the back of my mind, but I think like some of the smartest gamers are the people who play Parallel. Like there's because like if you've ever played it, they're smart. Like if they're that good, like you're smart.
For anyone that's never played a trading card game, I'm a great example for like the fact that you can get right into the game, and if you just follow the kind of like tutorial and like beginner type tools that are given to you through the game, like you can get started and learn it all from scratch. I knew absolutely nothing. I would love to say that I like read the right tutorials or followed the right people. I truthfully could not understand it and was like so confused. And I'm not afraid to say it now. In retrospect, I was so afraid that I had like gotten into something that I wouldn't actually enjoy, and then was like, holy shit, like this is dangerously addictive. Like, cause once it clicked, it was like, whoa, like I can play this game like a million different ways. And again, I haven't updated my deck in probably, 6 months or something. I need to add some of the cards that I'm seeing others play and whoop my ass with. So maybe in the future, Wayfinder will be applied to find me
the best deck.
Find me the best deck.
Find me the best deck.
Well, guys, this is a great place, I think, for us to wrap up. So I want to remind our listeners they should learn more by going to the website that I normally log into, because I'm actually caching Prime, is cache.wayfinder.ai. And then you can join the Discord for Wayfinder. It's discord.gg/AI Wayfinder. You should also go learn about Parallel by going to parallel.life. I also want to remind our listeners then to follow AI Wayfinder on Twitter or X, follow Parallel TCG, and then follow Temple Crash, which is Kalos's personal handle. And it's just a great place to see like what he's thinking in terms of like, the future of Wayfinder and Parallel. And, he tends to write really articulate threads on, all the cool things that they're building there. Otherwise, guys, thanks so much for coming on. Would love to give you the final word and And yeah, just really excited to get access to Wayfinder. I saw some the closed alpha invites have gone out. So, we're excited for this to hopefully go public in the new year, 2025.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, on my end, I think just obviously thank you guys for having us and, letting us talk through some of this stuff with you. Thanks to the community who've always kind of supported us and championed, new ideas that we've had and been in our corner for the last 3 years. I'm very excited about what we're going to be releasing on the game side and what's going to happen and how all that's going to impact and benefit, people who are really excited about the Prime ecosystem. And I'm really excited about Wayfinder and how that can change the way we interact with blockchain networks. And so, yeah, thank you again. And I'm happy to have been here, and I appreciate everyone's time and as well as the community.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And to stay up to date with future episodes, plus get expert tips, strategies, and exclusive content, subscribe to our free newsletter at the-edge.xyz.